Welcome back to the channel. In today's JavaScript lesson, we're going to cover the basic syntax of JavaScript, statements, comments, variables, data types, and arrays. So why don't you fire up VS Code or Replit, and we'll get started today. I'll see you soon. So why don't we begin with statements? And if you think about statements, all there are is just a script of basic instructions that the computer can follow one by one. And each individual statement ends with a semicolon. Now, in newer versions of JavaScript, you don't really have to end with a semicolon, but I like doing it because it's a little more old school and it's what I'm comfortable with, and there's nothing wrong with doing it. And you want to think about statements as commands that you're going to give to the computer. So go ahead and open up your browser and we'll go to repl.it, that's repl.it. And if you're using VS Code, that's also fine too. But I'm going to do it in REPL for those at home. And if you're in my class, maybe this might be easier for you. So before we begin, if you haven't logged into this, if you haven't signed up for a REPL account yet, go ahead and do that. You can pause the video and come back. But for those of you that have already signed up, let's get started. So click on New REPL at the top. It's going to say, what do you want to write in? And I think we're going to start with HTML. And the reason why we do this is because for JavaScript to work, we're going to need HTML and we're going to need CSS for the case of our project. So we're going to click that. And for the name, we're going to just say test or test.js. That's fine. And then you're going to hit create REPL right here, this green button. And it's going to load it in for you. So as we have all of this created, so just click on the script.js on this left-hand side here, and so we can write something, and I can show you what a basic statement looks like. So a basic statement would say, console, or we'll say window.alert, and we'll say hello. And I think this is the last example we did in previous lessons, but if I hit run, there we go. We have a pop-up window that says hello. There it is. So this is just a basic statement. We're saying, I want to do something. I told the computer to do it, and now it's going to do it. Now we're going to work on comments. So comments are important in code because they let us build this roadmap or leave instructions for us or for someone else. You might not code just for yourself. You actually might be coding on a team of other people. So for example, before you start writing like a long essay or whatever, you might write an outline, and that outline could be like a comment style, right? So why don't we jump back in this code and I'll show you what the comments look like in JavaScript, and then you can write them yourself. If you wanted to write a comment in JavaScript, it says 2 slashes, and we could say write or make a pop-up window that says hello. If you wanted to do multi-line comments in JavaScript, it's the slash, the asterisk, followed by an asterisk slash, and whatever you write in here, whatever you write is commented out. So comments don't run in code necessarily. That means they're not displayed in the browser as actual things that happen. They'll appear. Like if you did a view source on a JavaScript file, you'll see all those comments too. But comments are also important. Let's say you wrote some code. Let's say we did this, window.alert, and we did this again. And then we said, you know what, I don't want to do this. I want to save this for later. You can actually just comment that out. Or you could say, let's say I'm working with you, and I'll say, hey viewer, make another comment here that says aloha. And if you were to come and jump in on this code, you could see it for yourself. You might say, oh, well, thanks for letting me know what to do next. So I'll just say window.alert. Aloha. So why don't we talk about what variables are? Now we've done statements and we've done comments. So why don't we learn what variables are? And so you can think of variables as pieces of code that store other information. You can think of it like when you're doing pre-algebra, right? When we said x equals 10, whenever I say x, I really mean 10. So in JavaScript, it's the same way. We say that these variables will store information for us to use at a later time. And we can just write whatever we want. And all of this, we can have variables for everything. We can have variables for date. We can have variables for time. And every time a script runs, we can actually change these variables if we want. We can make them mutable and change it. I'll show you what I mean. So in code, before we write a variable, we have to give it a name and we have to identify it with the keyword var, followed by the name of the variable. So the keyword is in orange and the name of the variable is in pink. So we would say var and then followed by the variable name. In this case, I'm going to create a variable that stores a username. So I'm going to call it username. Now I've noticed you see the capital N in username, and I'm just using camel case. And camel case is just a way for coders to write things that it's easy to read by just capitalizing the first letter of select words in a name of things. Now we talk about variable assignment. So I've created the variable called username, but now I'm going to have to give it a value. So I would use the equal symbol to give it a value. And in this case, its value is going to be Howard in green. So var username equals Howard. In this example also, in variable assignment, I can reassign it a value because the values are temporary in JavaScript. We can reassign them. So the var username could equal Cam instead of saying Howard. It might actually be better if you reassign variables sometimes, especially when you're writing code and like the username changes, right? The username is not always going to be the same thing. Like your age, you're not always going to be the same age every time. You're going to be different ages. So that has to change over time as well. If we're putting it all together, this is the parts. We have a keyword, we have a variable name, we have an assignment operator, and then followed by the variable value. And you can also make empty variables. Var username equals nothing. There's just some quotes there and there's nothing. So this would actually return as undefined because you haven't defined any values for this particular variable at all. Now that we talked about variables, let's talk about data types. So there's three main ones that we use. They're numeric or integers. There are strings, names of things, labels, and we have Boolean values of true and false. So looking at the screen now, we can see the numeric values 0, 1, 2, and we have strings. 0, 1, Howard, Candy, Pie, and Pie. All those are strings, right? So remember, strings are wrapped in quotes. If I say 0 and I wrap it in a quote, it's not a number, it's a string. And then we have Boolean values of true and false because computers are quite literal. You're either going to run it if it's true and you're not going to run it if it's false. So when we write the data type number, we're going to use these tasks for like counting or incrementing or decrementing things. And if you can see the example here, we say var my_num equals 5. Notice that there's no quotes around this because it's an integer. More importantly, we can also concatenate these things together. That means put together. So if we have two variables, a first num and second num, and we say total, and we say first num plus a second num, what do you think we're going to get? So if we're here now in Replit, let's practice this now. If I said var, and I said first num, I'll just call it first, and I said this was 1, and I said var second, and this was 2, and I said var total equals first plus second, what do you think we're going to get? By the way, we should actually just output this value. Well, we'll just use the window alert. That's fine. There we go. Why don't you try this now? Let's figure out what we're going to get. Let's take a guess. Do you think it's 12? Do you think it's 3? Let's find out. Hit run. We get 3 because 1 plus 2 is 3. To be honest, when we're concatenating things, you might run into an error later, especially when you're trying to concatenate two strings. So why don't we look at strings now? We'll look at that data type and we'll try to concatenate them and then we'll see what we come up with. So here's our string data types. Now we did this example before with the username, but in this time I just say my name and we put it in quotes. With the string data type, we can also use it to store other pieces of code. We can use this to store HTML code. And then finally, why don't we think about combining these strings together? So why don't we work in Replit and we'll figure this out together. So instead of 1, I'll say my name, and then followed by another name, my last name. If I run this together, what do you think is going to happen? Are we going to have adding up numbers or adding up letters? Let's find out. We have this, Howard Cam, and you notice that there's no space in between my two variables. It's because we didn't put a space. We basically just said add the first thing and the second thing together. So we concatenate and we put it all together as one big word without any spaces. If you wanted to actually put spaces, then you would have to literally put a space, right? So let's look at my line 3. Quote, quote, followed by another plus. I have to literally put a space. Let's run it. There we go. That fixed a problem. That actually is much better. And now let's talk about Boolean data types. So Boolean data types only have two values. They're either true or they're false. And you can think of it like a light switch. So if I'm flicking the light switch on or flicking the light switch off, it's a binary choice. It's either going to be on or it's going to be off. For example, you would use this to say, has the player expended 3 lives playing this game? True or false? There are rules that must be followed when you're writing JavaScript variable names. For example, my name is Howard, and if I went to a room with 1,000 other Howards, actually, I think that might be kind of awesome. But it's going to be very confusing, right? So you want to make sure you use good variable names. If you said to your dog, "Hey, you'll understand, but your friends won't understand." So you want to use good names, and JavaScript has rules, and why don't we go over that now? The name must begin with a letter, a $sign, or an underscore, and it can't start with a number. You must not use a dash or a period in a variable name. Those are reserved, especially that dot. It's called the member operator. You cannot use keywords or reserved words. So reserved words can be found at that link that I have on the slide right now. You can also go on Google and look up what are JavaScript reserved words. They're always changing, and it's good to keep up to date with that. Variables are case sensitive, very much so. So if you look at the word score and one of them a capital S, those are 2 different variable names, and it's bad practice to create 2 variables that have the same name using different cases. A name that describes the kind of information that the variable stores. Use good names. For example, first name might be used to store a person's first name and last name for their last name. So use good variable names. Basically all rule number 5 is. If your variable name is made up of more than 1 word, we can use camel case, and that's what I talked about earlier by using a capital letter for the first letter of every word after the first word. You can also probably use underscores as well to separate those words out, but don't use the dash. Let's now talk about arrays. So arrays are special types of variables, and it doesn't just store one value. It holds like a list of other values. And arrays are helpful because if you don't know how many items are in a list, you can just dump them all into the array, and then we can just use like a loop to call them all out, which we'll learn later. But you want to think about an array as a list of things. So if you have like all of your favorite movies, all of your favorite foods, you could probably just store them into a list called an array. So why don't I show you an example of what an array is? So writing an array is kind of easy. It's the same variable naming procedure. So we say var, let's create a list of fave foods. Oh, we can camel case it. And then we have these brackets. And within these brackets, we have these quotes. And then we begin. So because it's a string of things, I have favorite foods. I like steak. That's going to be a common running theme. I like rice. And I like salad. To be quite honest, I actually like pizza. You know what? Hey, let's do that. Var pizza. Supreme. Oh. I actually like vegetarian pizza too. I like a crunchy vegetarian pizza. Vegetarian. And then, basic cheese. So these are arrays. And arrays can also store integer values too. So if we said var ages, we can store, whoops, those are strings. We can store integers, right? Let's talk about numbering items in an array. So when we write an array, they're all assigned values and we have them numbered. And we need to remember that whenever we count something, that we start counting from 0. Because 0 is the first thing. If you think about the number line, 0 is the first thing that appears, so 0 is the first thing. So we have the var fave foods, and you look at the index number 0, index number 1, and index number 2. We have steak, salad, rice. And there's 3 things in this list. The length of this entire array is 3 things, but it uses an index position of 0, 1, 2. And to access an item in the array, it's really easy. All you're doing is just calling the array name, putting some square braces, and then calling it by its number. If we're here and I got rid of all this, and I see my fave foods and I want to call salad, what is the index position of salad? Well, let's start counting from 0. Steak is 0, rice is 1, salad is 2. So I would say window.alert and fave foods, bracket, what is salad? 2. If I run it, there it is, salad. Fave foods 2. I'm calling index position 2. 0 is steak, 1 is rice, salad is 2. To get the length of an array, it's kind of easy. We can use the .length function in JavaScript. So why don't we do this now? Why don't I just create a new variable for you called getLength is going to equal favefoods.length. All right? And that's going to return a number. Now, clearly you and I can see that the length of this favefoods array is 3 things long. And we should remember that it's different from its index position, okay? The length is different from the index position. So if I say window.alert and I say getLength, it should return 3. There it is, 3. So what we're going to do now is get the values of the array and then we're going to change them over. Let's take a look. And right now we have steak, rice, salad, and maybe you have something that you like better. So we can replace it. So if I said fave foods, and why don't we replace salad? We can replace salad. So salad is number 2 on our list. And we're going to replace it with lobster, surf and turf. And then if I was to print out the entire fave foods, well, let's take a look. Hit run. There we go. Steak, rice, and lobster. Because you've replaced it. So you're saying I'm going to replace index position number 2 with this thing here. And to prove that we can do double changes, we'll say window.alert here. I'm going to print it twice, okay? Here we go. So I'm going to print the fave foods list that's unmodified. I'm going to modify it, and then I'm going to print it again. Oh, you know what? Now would be a good time to write some comments. All right. Create a list of fave foods. All right. And then let's make another comment. We'll say print out list, print out unmodified list. And then we're going to say change salad to lobster. And then we're going to say right here, print out new list. I hit run. Here we go. Steak, rice, salad. I hit OK. It's going to pop up again. Steak, rice, lobster. Nice. So what we're going to do now is learn about pop, push, shift, unshift, and slice. And we're going to remove and add items to the array using these methods. It's going to seem a little confusing now, but it's okay. I'm going to show you some general examples on some slides, and you can try these for yourself and do a little practice. It'll be okay. Why don't we look at the first one? So why don't we use this sample array for our upcoming example? And if you want to jump in Replit now, why don't you go ahead and do that? So if you want to hit pause and then push this right into your Replit, that's fine. So we're going to create a list of scientists: Kepler, Hubble, and Sagan. So when you're done, unpause it and come back. So let's talk about pop first. Pop removes an item at the end. So if this is our original, we have var scientist, Kepler, Hubble, Sagan, and then we say scientist.pop, we're going to remove the thing at the end. We're going to remove whatever's at the end of the list out. So Sagan is going to drop out. And so the new list is going to say var scientist, Kepler, and Hubble. Push adds an item at the end. So if we look at Kepler, Hubble, Sagan, and we say scientist.push followed by what we want to push. So if we want to push Tyson into this list, we would say scientist.push Tyson. Scientist is the name of the array. We're going to push in one more thing, and what are we pushing in is Tyson. Shift removes an item from the front. So we have Kepler, Hubble, Sagan, and yeah, you got it. By shifting it out, we're going to say, I'm going to shift it over, scientist.shift, and now Kepler is gone. We're left with Hubble and Sagan. And unshift adds an item to the start. It's going to be different from shift. Shift will remove it from the start. Unshift adds an item to the start. So if we want to say Kepler, Hubble, Sagan as our original, and we want to put Tyson at the front, then we say scientist.unshift Tyson, and then we go Tyson, Kepler, Hubble, Sagan. Okay? Like I said, you can rewind, pause, and fast forward through these parts once you kind of get it down. But these are important to understand, especially when you're trying to modify arrays. And slice. Slice extracts the data, but the length of the array remains the same. So let's take a look at this. Why don't you code this now and see what happens? If we say var x equals scientist.slice 0, 2, and you do the window alert x to print it out, what should you get? So let's take a look at this and run through it together. So I wrote this out. We do scientist slice 0, 2. So 0 is where we begin from and 2 is where we end. If I hit run, so 0, 1, 2. So I have Kepler and Hubble is what's left. Sagan's out. So I'm going to cut it at 2. But what if I did this? If I said slice 1, 2, what are we left with? Let's find out. You're just left with Hubble, because you start at 1 and you cut out 2. So 0, 1, I start here and I cut here. So all you're left with is that. Slice is one of those things that it's a little tricky to understand, but you have to imagine slice to say that it's where I am going to start from and where I'm going to cut to. Okay? So do a little practice with slice and then you'll master it. It'll be awesome. I have faith in you. Thanks for watching today. I hope you leave comments below, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. And that covers JavaScript, just this basic intro. I look forward to seeing you at the next video. See you later. Bye.